Good morning, everyone. It looks like it is just 11:30 now, so I am going to give this just a couple minutes so that we can get some people joined, and then we will get started. I hope everyone is having a nice Saturday morning. I had to think about it for a minute. I knew it was Saturday a minute ago, but then I forgot. Hi, Karen. Good morning. Today I am going to be playing with Crescent Moon, which is a favorite. It is a super versatile, super pattern that gets used a lot. It's funny because I joked a few minutes ago that I had forgotten that it was Saturday, and last night I actually did. Since shutdown and everything else, time has no meaning for me, so I just kind of wing it and hope I get the days right. So last night I was sitting there thinking, I don't have a ton of examples, and then I just went back through some of my recent tiles and a couple of my older tiles, and I pulled out some of my Crescent Moon examples because I have used it so often that I had a number of really cool ones to share with you. So, if you're a CZT, or if you've taken classes with CZTs, you've probably done a tile that looks like some version of this. And the reason that is because when most CZTs teach their beginner class, we use a similar format, and that's because we like to teach certain tangles or certain strokes and methods to explain the language of Zentangle and to teach some of the basic strokes. And Crescent Moon is one of those tangles that embodies that encompasses that. So as you can see here, I have 4 different versions of Crescent Moon, and it's all pretty much the same. So I wanted to kind of point out some of those differences and talk for a minute about how changing just a couple little things can make a big difference in the overall effect. So here is Crescent Moon done probably about the size I do it most often. And I've darkened in the inside and this negative space in the middle, which creates a different look than here, where I left the Crescent Moon oval shape open, and then continued another pattern in the negative space. Here I colored them in again, and again used a different pattern in the center in the negative space to create yet a different look. And then with this one, I left them open and then did a darker bubble on the inside. So just those couple little changes can really change the mood and the feel of the pattern. I'm going to set those off to the side. I'm going to start out by demonstrating Crescent Moon today for you, and then I'm going to show you some other variations and some other ways that maybe you can use this pattern. So let's see here. All right, I'm going to take my mechanical pencil here, and I'm going to add some dots and make my border. Hope everybody's doing good this morning. I don't know about you. It has rained for days here, but I'm in New York, so I didn't get any of the severe weather, just some thunderstorms. Makes for good sleeping weather for me, though. All right. Hi, Linda. Hi, Joyce. I'm glad you could join this morning. So I'm going to divide this tile up into 2 spaces because I'm going to do 2 versions here. So I'm just going to draw a line diagonally. I'm going to take my pen. I'm going to choose one of my sections, and I'm going to make kind of like a C laying on its side, like a little ladybug shape, right? And I'm going to make another one, leave a little space, make another one, and I'm going to have these little shapes kind of march all the way around. When I get to this corner, I'm going to curve it so that it carries on over to the next line. I'm going to turn my tile, make another, then another, then another, turn my tile again until I have gone all the way around that section of my string. Good morning, Barbara. I am going to take a sip of my tea because I have a frog in my throat. And now I'm going to come back and I am going to add an aura to all of these little ladybug shapes. So an aura is like a halo. So I'm accenting and carrying on that shape, right? So I am mimicking the shape that's already there. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way around till I have added one aura to each of these little crescents, these little C shapes, these little ladybugs. Right? Okay, so you can see how changing the size of these little humps, these little bubbles, or these little half orbs, however you choose to think of them, by making them in different sizes, you'll definitely get a different look, right? All right, so now I'm going to come in and I'm going to make another aura. So right here, it's kind of like a little funky shape now, so I'm actually going to start here. And I'm going to try and keep my auras about the same size this time. You can vary those, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, I like to just pay attention to trying to make them about the same size. I'm going to tuck right in there, but I'm not going to try and fit all the way over here into this space. I'm just going to ignore that for now. I'm turning my tile as I go, paying attention to each individual stroke. I find this to be a nice soothing tangle to draw. So again, I came back to this little funky place where they're touching, so I couldn't really get a good aura of both of those. But that's okay, because I'm just going to come in here and there. The nice part about Crescent Moon is you can make as many of these little auras as you want to, as many or as few. So if I wanted to fill this entire space up, I could just keep going and making aura after aura after aura, and I'm going to get a different look each time. Every time I add an aura, it's going to change it up a little bit. Or maybe I want to have a lot of negative open space here. Maybe I have something else in mind for that area. It gives you a lot of options, a lot of opportunity to do some different things. So I'm going to add a couple more auras here. And again, I'm just adding one more little loop to each of these. And this is one of those tangles where the magic really happens once we add the shading, and that's super fun. And sometimes you run out of room, and that's okay. Just kind of squish some stuff in there. I think I'm going to do one more. So I'm going to fit that in there. Because I want there to be some space, but I want this to have a number of little rings. Work my way all the way around. Really paying attention. There. Now, you can come in with, I like to use a graphic during these demos just for time space. I'm glad you made it. I know there's been a lot of people with power outages lately, so I'm glad that it came back on for you. I'm going to take my graphic and I'm going to color in all my little ladybug shapes. I like to, in classes, I like to encourage people to do this. It's a great way for them to not have to wait for people, because everyone kind of tangles at our own pace. So the nice part about this tangle is you can kind of add to stuff. Either you can color them in, you could add a different pattern into this shape, or you could leave it as it is. And it's a great way to kind of get everyone all in the same spot without anyone feeling like they have to rush or to feel like they're falling behind. And you should never feel like you have to rush or like you're falling behind in tangling. Tangling should be relaxing. It should be enjoyable. I always move pretty quick in my videos, but I do that because I want to give you as much information in a short period of time as I can. And I always leave my videos up for you, so you can go back and you can watch them again over and over and over, as many times as you want. And I hope that each time you learn something, or it sparks an idea of your very own, and that you really take some time to learn to make the patterns your own. So I love coloring in, and I love coloring in with my graphic because I think that it adds a nice, rich, velvety feel to it. I love watching the white paper turn to that jet black. There's something just super satisfying about it. So I have inked in those areas. Now I'm going to come in to the center right here, and I'm going to ink in the center as well. Just because I really like that crisp contrast, right? My pen's making squeaky noises. If that's I know that for some people that drives them crazy. Myself, I actually really love the sound of pen on paper. But I usually try not to use a super squeaky pen in class because I don't want to bother anybody. Again, it should be all nice and peaceful and calm for you when you're tangling. There we go. And again, there's no need to rush. If you want to do this with an 01, by all means, you can certainly do that. That's one of the reasons I like the 01. It's small enough for teeny tiny detail work, and it's big enough to fill in spaces without it becoming tedious. And if you do find it tedious, then just get yourself a graphic pen. Alright, so there we go. Now, one thing I do like to tell people, especially my lefties, if you put down this much solid black, it's going to stay wet for a few minutes because it is cotton paper. So you want to kind of avoid dragging your hand through it. And if you're a lefty, by all means, grab a piece of scrap paper and just place it over top of it as you're drawing so that you don't drag your hand through your work. But it'll dry pretty quickly in a couple minutes, and also I like to let it dry for a minute before I do my shading. I am a big fan of adding my shading at the end of my tile, though you can certainly shade each individual pattern as you go. So that is one, that is your standard, your basic way of drawing Crescent Moon. I am going to use this other half, and I'm going to draw it a little differently, but Same basic idea. We're going to make some ladybug shapes. And I'm making these not much different in size. And again, I'm just going all the way around, turning my tile as I go. And I'm not trying to match them up, although I certainly could if I wanted to. That always is a very, very cool effect. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to add more auras. But this time, I am going to make very small auras. So I'm keeping my pen as close to those little crescent moons as I can. And I'm just going to work my way around. Okay. I'm going to come in, I'm going to do one more. And this is a fun way to just kind of very simply change up this pattern, is to just vary the sizes of the auras. You could make really large auras, you could make really small auras. Entirely up to you. I haven't had a lot of caffeine today, so my pen strokes are a little shakier than usual, which is kind of creating an interesting little effect. My lines are sort of blending into each other here and there. But I kind of like it because in contrast with these ones, which are crisper, these kind of look a little sketchy. So now instead of making a ton of different auras, this time I'm going to play with this negative space. And I am going to actually just create one aura on the inside of that crescent moon. So I left a little bit of a space, and then I just kind of went all the way around the interior shape. So now I have this kind of cool scallopy, it almost looks like a bat. So I've got that shape, and I'm going to add some more auras. Again, I'm making this thicker than the original little skinny auras that I did at the bottom there, right? So my focus is now on this shape instead of the little crescents or ladybug shapes. And as you can see, that shape changes as I go, right? It exaggerates the shape that was already there. So you can see I've gotten two completely different looks from basically enhancing each piece of the crescent moon. I'm going to do one more. And then we'll shade it really quickly, and we'll move on to some of the other things that you can do with crescent moon. So I'm going to come in, and I have, if I can find where I put my pencil, there we go. So I've got my pencil. I always like to encourage people to remember when you were a little kid and you drew birds and they look like that? We're looking for that V shape, that little bird shape in the in-betweens, right? Oh, haha. Every so often I look at my tile and I'm like, hey, I missed a spot. So right here I didn't color in. So I want this space colored in. There we go. There we go. So now I'm going to come in and look for these bird shapes. So like right here and right here, in between these little crescents. And I'm going to lay down a little bit of graphite, kind of just a line. And this is where the magic happens. This is where we get some fun, cool stuff going on, and it's going to take it from a flat, kind of kind of two-dimensional image, it's going to take on a 3D effect. And I'm still being a little careful to not drag my hand across the big chunks of black that I've inked in because I don't want to smudge it. But that'll be dry in a minute or two. I would normally give it another minute before I did, but I want to move on. So now I come in with my tortillon and I blend it. And I blend it again using that V shape, right, to kind of accent that little depth in there. And I'm very careful as I do this to not bring my graphite all the way up and over, because if you shade everything and everything becomes gray, then you have no highlights and you have no shadows. And while we don't get crazy with in traditional pure Zentangle form, shading should be simple. We're not paying a ton of attention to the light source. We're not really diving into a whole bunch of shading concepts. We can certainly do that when we make Zentangle inspired art, but in pure Zentangle, we pay attention to things that are darker look further away, and things that are closer are lighter. So we always want to add a little bit of contrast. I like to leave the very center white because then it looks like it has a little highlight or a sparkle, and these graphite lines lead to depth, so that looks like there's some more going on. And the reason that I like to point that out is because a lot of people come to Zentangle not with an art background, and you can shade and make your tiles look amazing and really kind of dive in without feeling like you need an art degree or you have to spend a ton of time learning all sorts of fancy, funky shading techniques. The most basic of Zentangle tiles have very simple shading techniques to them, so I just like to point that out. Alright, so this other section, those little V shapes aren't quite as obvious, but they're still there. So I have one right there, and here, and here, here. This one goes like this. This one kind of branches there, and that's okay. Again, these don't have to be perfect because we're just going for an impression, right? This one looks a little spider webby, and that's kind of cool. And I know a lot of people use their tortillon in little circles. I tend to use mine like I'd use the side of my pencil, and that's just personal choice. I have a hard time controlling my tortillon if I try and use little circles. But if that works better for you, by all means, you just make little circles to drag the graphite up. And I'm shading this in the exact same way on purpose, because I could shade this in a different way and get a different effect. But I really wanted you to see how putting your focus on different areas of this crescent moon will give you a different look. There we go. Alright, so you can see how that's two ways of doing this, and both are very simple. I haven't done anything crazy with this pattern. I've just drawn the pattern and placed my focus, kind of like a yin and yang, a light and dark here. So that's a fun way to play with it. I have a couple other examples that I wanted to show you of other fun ways. Now that we've talked about the basics, I wanted to talk about some fun ways of using this. So if you've been to any of my previous lives, you know that I'm a big fan of talking about using your patterns as a border. I think that this is such a great way to, emphasize a pattern that you've played with in a million different ways. You use it all the same ways. an easy way to mix it up is to make it into a border. So what I did with this one is I simply put in my string border, and then I accented it with my pen, and I ordered it so that I had like a little bar going around. And then I did my crescent moon around the outside, and then I did crescent moon directly opposite. So I did line them up on this one. And then I did my auras. And instead of coloring it in solid or leaving it blank, I just put some little line work in there. And then I shaded it, and then I also shaded around the bar. So that took this pattern just in a different direction. And it can be a lot of fun to do that. Okay, and then I probably, if we have time, I may come back and I'm going to try something that I haven't tried before, which will be kind of fun. And I'm going to try and put a flower in here made of crescent moons. So let's see. Also, something that I've been talking about a lot is the idea of macros, right? Macro being taking like a fragment of our pattern and using that to create a tile. So with this one, you can see that at first glance maybe you might not recognize that that's kind of what I did here, but if this pattern wasn't in here, what you would see is here is my ladybug shape, and here is an aura, and here is another aura, and another aura, and then another aura. And then I came into that and added more crescent moons on the inside. So it's kind of like crescent moonception, like crescent moon inside crescent moon. And it was a lot of fun to do. I filled it in with almost like in a pod. Not quite. It's really just orbs, but I squished them in such a way that it kind of gave that impression. And I think it kind of almost looks like jewelry. And it was really fun to do. So that's something fun to play with. Okay. And then shapes. I love to take my patterns and place them in different shapes. I love to use my patterns as a fill, right? I think that there's a lot to be said for taking a pattern that maybe, you're really used to just drawing as a pattern and using it to fill another pattern. So here I have taken hexagon shapes and I've stacked them together. And then I actually sketched out a little hexagon so that I can kind of show you what I did here. So I don't want my 5, I want my 1. I have a whole stack of pens off to the side here, so all right. So I'm going to ink in my hexagon. I'm sorry, my printer has decided to do something weird off to the side all by itself. I don't know what it's doing, but if it's really loud, I apologize. So I'm going to make my little hexagon here. And then I'm going to do my crescent moon in that shape. Right? And you can do that with triangles or squares or rectangles or rhombuses. Rhombuses are a seriously unappreciated shape, just saying. And then what I did was I added my crescent moon in each of these little areas of my hexagon. Right? And then I came in and I added my auras, and you could do these thick or thin, but I kind of wanted a depth with that, so I just did a couple and then instead of filling them in, I added some shading. But you could certainly add other patterns, or you could fill the whole thing up. I'm going to just add a couple. And then again, I shaded in these little crevices, and then I also shaded in the negative space there. So that's just some, so hopefully that gives you some ideas. Again, like I said, you could do that. So I had said you could do it with other shapes. So if you were to have, let's say some triangles, you could also go in and add your shapes and then do some auras on there. And then you're off and running in a completely different direction. So you can see there's so much that you can do with this. I'm going to set that one off to the side. I see I had a couple other people join. Good morning. If you are joining late, just so you know, I do always leave the videos up so you can kind of come back and look at them at your leisure, watch them as many times as you want to. Let's see here. I have a million different directions that I could run around in to play with, but I'm just going to show a couple other little ideas, and I hope that you will take Crescent Moon and kind of play with it in your own ways. I was going to dig out all of my examples, and then I had so many examples I wasn't quite sure how many I should do, so I tried to keep myself in check today. One of the things that I didn't bring out is a Zentangle, because I've been trying to stick with standard square tiles, but I do want to mention that Crescent Moon around the outside of a Zentangle is a great way to finish it off. It makes a lovely border around a Zentangle. So I'm going to put my border in here. Now I'm going to come in and I am going to do another pattern here, and I'm going big. I'm making big giant ladybugs, and I'm not paying super close attention to making them all the same size. I want them to be kind of mixed up a little bit. Okay, so I've got kind of non-standard shapes going on here, and that's okay. I am now going to come in and I'm going to add a aura on each one of these. Other ways to mix this up would be to change your pen sizes and make thick auras using a thicker pen. Use a skinny little pen to vary the size of your auras. Okay. I'm going to make one more aura going all the way around. I had a question this week about why I do different variations instead of just doing a tile. I do that for a couple of reasons. I know there are a number of people out there that do free classes or do free demos where that's the purpose, is to create a tile along with the CZT who is teaching. So I I think that's fantastic, and I love to even pop into those myself. But the reason that I wanted to do this is because I hadn't found anyone else that was doing this. Maybe they'll demo a pattern, maybe they'll show you, a tile. But one of my favorite things is way back when I first started learning tangling, I kind of got lost in pattern collecting. And I'll come back to this in a minute. I just want to talk about this for a second. I got lost in pattern collecting. There's so many amazing patterns out there, and there's so many that you can always be learning new patterns, and that's great. But I found that I was spending so much time collecting and learning new patterns that I wasn't actually making any art. I wasn't, spending time actually tangling. I was constantly learning new patterns. And while that was fun and it was great, it wasn't letting me really further my Zentangle practice in the way that I wanted to. And it was something that even at seminar I talked to Rick about, and I had said, do I need to know all the patterns? Do I need to learn all the patterns? And he said, if you only know how to draw a handful of patterns, if you do them in different ways, you will always be able to make new art. A favorite book of mine is Pattern Play. I don't recommend a ton of Zentangle books in my own practice. Everybody has their favorites, and because everyone has different tastes, I don't recommend a lot of books. This is one of the ones that I do. It's called Pattern Play, and it's by Chris Letourneau and Sonia Yenser. And what they do in this book is they teach you how to take a pattern and make it your own, to change it up when you use it, to look at it in new and fun and different ways. And I'm hoping that that's what people are getting out of these little demos that I'm doing. You don't always have to draw your pattern the way you were taught to draw it. You can draw it that way if you love it that way, but sometimes it's fun to mix it up and do something a little different. So anyway, with that said, come back to this. So I have these Aura'd now, and I have a choice to make. I can add a pattern to my ladybug shapes, to my crescent moons, or I could add a pattern into all these little auras, right? And with that in mind, you begin to see all of the different opportunities that present ourselves, right? So today, maybe I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a pattern. And this is just a little zigzaggy pattern into the aura around my crescent moon shapes, right? So this then takes on a completely different look than it would if I left it empty. And if I go in and instead of doing that same pattern in all of them, I mix it up, it takes on an even further different fun look, right? And this is a great way to kind of play with a bunch of different patterns and yet unify them all in one tile, because then it doesn't look super chaotic because everything's confined to one pattern. And yet you can, bring in however many patterns you have here, right? You guys are all so sweet. I love kind of just looking at a pattern and trying to come up with new and fun ways to do different things with it. It challenges me and makes me think outside the box because it's so easy to get stuck in a rut. I love flux. I drew flux the same way probably for 3 years, and then I was like, maybe I should do something different with it. And then I really dove in, and now I really love flux. I do it all the time. But I think that it's really important to just constantly try and challenge yourself, whether it's drawing something, maybe a new way, or with a different size pen, or really anything. So, like here, I said the different size pen, so maybe I will come in and I'll just add some little dots inside this one. You can, let's see. And these aren't, the patterns that I'm placing in here aren't even necessarily Zentangle patterns, although you certainly could go in and put Zentangle patterns into all of these little auras that you've drawn. I'm going to leave this particular tile unfinished, and I'll come back and I'll finish it later. But because I do want to come in and show you a couple more things before we wrap today. I said that if we had time, I was going to come in here, and this is actually the first time I've done it, so it may work, it may not, and that's okay, because sometimes it's fun to just do a pure exploration. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to look at this border that I did here, and I'm going to try and make a little stem that kind of replicates about the width of that border. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to put a little hat on it, like I would for Rixty or some of my other patterns. Only I'm going to make it longer, and then I'm going to add a couple little spokes. And it's okay if it's not perfect. I'll just come back and I'll fix those lines a little later. That looks good. Alright, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I usually like 5 when I try and make a flower. I am going to, because I don't love that line, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my graphic pen to thicken this up. We'll see how this goes. See, sometimes it's fun to just kind of go wild, right? And now I am going to make my ladybug shape here, and here, and here, here, and here, and then I'll flip it. So it kind of looks like a little rice grain, and that's okay. And then I'm going to add an aura. I'm going to have to squish that in, but that's okay. It doesn't fit super well, but I kind of thought that might be the case. Some of the things that I like to always try and do when I do my patterns is, can I make this into something organic, especially like grid tangles? Can I make it into a border? Can I put it in a spiral? Can I put a pattern in which pieces of this individual tangle? So I don't necessarily love this. I'm going to play with it a little bit. Maybe I'm going to add another spoke down there. My little ladybug shape, and my aura, and my ladybug shape, and an aura. And now I think I will add this pattern, this little line work that I did. I'm just going to add that into those crescents, right? And what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that all my line work goes in the same direction. I'm not paying attention to necessarily, you know, turning it to make it change, because I want that unity. So like I said, I don't particularly love it. I would probably play with it a little bit to refine it a little bit, but I think it's a neat idea, and I think that it has some potential, and it looks neat with that border. So with that said, I hope that this gave you some ideas. I also love Crescent Moon in a spiral. I didn't draw that for you today, but it's definitely another avenue to go. The other thing you can do is to vary the widths of your auras, so that you have, let me do that really quick for you, because I think that's a big one, and people don't think to do that. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to do it really quick. So I have my little ladybugs. They're fairly uniform, not perfect, but fairly uniform. And if you wanted to, you could vary these even in a pattern. A big one, a little one, a big one, a little one. It's, you know, I start on Saturday mornings and I have a couple ideas in my head, and then usually my brain runs off in like 47 different directions, and I just want to show you all the things, and we only have so much time. All right. So I do my, you know, a little aura onto each of these. Right? And then you could do a bigger aura. And then a skinny little one. And then another big one. And once again, it completely changes the look of what we were doing, right? And then you can go in and you can do something fun like add polka dots into the body. I like to add polka dots, and I think it's because I call them ladybugs. But add in little polka dots. You could, you know, maybe instead of drawing skinny little auras, maybe you swap up your pens and you make your auras with a darker, thicker pen to give you, you know, an even different look. I like to use the graphic pen to make really fat, chunky line work sometimes. It adds a lot of drama. But, you know, you can see how just playing with that, even just for a second, changes things a lot, right? You can stack. So I have one there, right? What's stopping me from doing this? And putting another row there, and then replicating that, right? So you can see I've gone off on another tangent of more fun ways to play with this. I could probably use a dozen patterns and be limited to that. Like, if I were stuck on a desert island and I only had a handful of patterns, I could still make art, and I could make art forever. And I think that is my hope when you come and check out my little demo videos, that you will be inspired to revisit some of the patterns that maybe you learned a long time ago, or that you never use because they're not your favorites, and to kind of see if, you know, maybe there's something you can do differently. There are some patterns that I never used until I started drawing them in a different way, and now I use them all the time. So try not to limit yourself to the way that you were taught to draw it the first time. I think it's important to learn it in a specific way because it lets us have a starting off point. But after that, all these patterns are yours. You can do anything you want with them. I am a big rule breaker from way back, and I think that's the best part of tangling. You can be taught the rules so that you can know which ones you want to break and what direction you want to go in. So I hope you had fun. I hope that you have some new ideas, and I would love to see them. You can always feel free to put them in the comments or email me. My email is whimsybykelly@gmail.com. Made it nice and easy for everybody. And just play with stuff, have some fun. And I will see you next Saturday. Just so everyone knows, my newsletter normally comes out the week before the end of the month, but I had some family stuff this week, so it's a little behind. I am hoping to get it out this weekend, but I do have my classes coming out, Tangle classes, watercolor classes, and I will continue to do my free demos on Saturday mornings, at least for the time being. And I hope that you keep coming to visit, and I will see you next Saturday. If at any point you have trouble accessing the videos, eventually I am going to move them over to my website, which is whimsybykelly.com, simply because I'm not sure how long Facebook will let me keep them up. So anyway, I will see you soon, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your weekend.